Do you have a question about today's program? You can text it to us live. Text your question to 425-477-9950. That's 425-477-9950. Now, back to the show.
Well, hello, good morning. Welcome back to the Alaska SeaLife Center for another of our virtual visits. And once again, today we are out in the aviary. As you might have gotten a clue there off of our title today, you know what we're going to be talking about. But then we also had that footage at the beginning of our aviary. And actually, we're going to cut right on over to a handheld for a minute here because it's a little busier in the aviary. And we're going to talk about why things are starting to get busy in the aviary, at least for some birds. So we'll be talking about that today. But before we really get into the program, we always want to thank our sponsors. And so for this season of virtual visits, Royal Caribbean Group has made it possible for us to just stream these free out to the web, out to you, wherever you are, so that you can come visit us here at the SeaLife Center virtually. And if you were here at the SeaLife Center today, this morning, you would have seen, well, not much of a sunrise. It's a little cloudy. We got some snow overnight, but it's still kind of cool to see those clouds whip around in Resurrection Bay. So a pretty still morning. You can see that water is very flat. I was actually out in the bay yesterday, and we went out past the little islands out there, so it did get a little choppier out there, but it was a pretty still day, which it's always fun to be on the water on a still day. But that is the sunrise from this morning. Not really much of a sunrise after all. All right, so for today's program, we're going to be talking about our birds, and specifically we're going to be talking about our ducks. And so the reason we're talking about our ducks, if we cut back on over to our little handheld camera here, I'm going to zoom in and show you that some of our birds are looking a little fancier than others. So if I zoom in on our tufted puffins here, you might be able to see, yeah, sure, they're getting their tufts in. This one there's kind of got some wispy tufts going on, not the most elegant looking of tufts. So the puffins are starting to undergo their molts. Our alcids, our diving birds, are starting to undergo their molts into their breeding plumages, but they're not there yet. But the birds that are there are our ducks. Our ducks are looking good. They are ready for breeding season, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, with it being so busy out there on the aviary, breeding season is coming up. These ducks are getting excited, and the reason they put on these nice bright colors to look good, right? They are trying to attract a mate. And so the males in our ducks get really, really bright. We're going to go over the types of ducks we have. We're going to kind of take a look at those bright plumages. And most of these clips, they also do have the female in them as well. So you'll kind of see the difference. But the females tend to stay pretty drab in color. It's a cool pattern. They frequently have very cool patterns on their feathers. But it's mostly just variations of brown. Or maybe like gray and brown. And the reason for this is to blend in with where they'll be nesting. Now, here at the SeaLife Center, in our aviary, we actually have quite a few nest locations. We've got nests up on the cliffs. We've got nests kind of by the water, down on the ground. We've got actually a nest all the way up on the cliffs. Maybe we'll talk about that someday. But the ducks like to nest in grass out in the wild. So we actually have to provide them like these little boxes. We'll fill it with grass and moss. And as things are getting a little further into breeding season, I'm actually planning to do a couple more virtual visits looking at what does it take to get nesting material for these birds. How do the birds like to use that nesting material? So we're going to kind of be following the whole wind up to breeding season here in the aviary. But let's jump on over to that handheld cam and see what ducks I can find. Now at the very beginning, we actually were looking at a king eider. So just waiting on my camera. Nope, we have a harlequin duck there. We'll talk about the harlequin duck first. So the Harley is a smaller duck that we've got, and you can see it's very, very decorative there, that male. And so the harlequin duck male got this flashy, flashy pattern, pretty small, cruises around, but the female, we're going to see if she's here. There she is, pretty drab. As I said, it's a cool pattern. They have that little eye spot. But that is the harlequin duck, and if we cut on over to the handheld camera here, I'm going to see if I can find them. And while I'm there, I'm going to look around for some other ducks. So let's see if I can find our Harley. Oh, over by the shore there. So if you come visit us here at the SeaLife Center, if you jump out in the aviary, and you know the birds you're looking for, it's kind of fun to just look for them. See if you can find them, see if you can ID them. And this is actually a great time of the year to start looking for birds outdoors. In fact, we here in Seward have many birds that aren't going to stop here. We wouldn't see them for most of the year, but it's a great opportunity to get out there and catch birds as they migrate through, as things start to melt and the spring comes up. It's not quite here yet, but it's on its way. So this Harley male, he's just chilling up there on the rock. I don't actually see the female, so she's not just following close with him. And it is really the only pair of Harleys that we've got in here right now. So it's not an issue. He's not feeling ultra competitive. But, oh, there we go. I've got someone here. We're going to bring her out here in just a minute. One of our aviculturists who pointed out the female, and she went right behind the rocks there. Harley. We're going to talk about the king. Looks like my clips. Here are the kings. And these are a large duck. Compared to the harlequin, look at them, they're about eyes. And so they are very bright. People always come in, they see this duck, they go, what is the duck with the nose and the fin? It's got like these cool shark fins. That is a male king eider. And back there, that is the female king eider. So again, you can see that difference in coloration. The males being very colorful, even with their bill tucked, even when they're napping. They have that bright coloration. And then the females are that nice brown speckle that blends in real well with the grass. And in fact, this is probably I would say this is the duck we are asked most often about in the aviary here at the SeaLife Center. When I was an intern, they actually made like an intern cohort shirt for us that had just one of the king eider males on it. And it just said, male king eider. And that was it. They just decided that was going to be the shirt to represent our intern cohort, because we got asked about it a lot. It's a very flashy duck. Even the female has a really cool patterns on here, and we got a tufted puffin showing off in the way there. But you can see that nice speckled pattern. And of course, as we're looking at these birds, if you have any questions, I want to encourage you to ask them. You can kind of just ask them throughout this, because today we're going to be cruising around in the aviary looking for our birds. The next one up, we are looking for our spectacled eider. I don't see our spectacled eider, so we might have to pop up a clip. There you go. So we only have 2 of these out on the aviary right now, and this is another large sea duck. And you might guess, if I asked you, is this the male or the female? That brightly colored one is the male, and that brown one is the female. But how do you tell the difference between the 2 females? Well, it's a marking that you actually see on the male here as well. The spectacled eider is so called because it looks like it's wearing spectacles or glasses, and even the female has this. So as the female comes back in the background, you can see that lighter circle around her eyes. And the king eider female does not have that. Even though the brown is a very similar pattern, the males and females of the spectacled eiders both have these little eyes, the little eye specks. And I'm trying to get a close-up shot here of the eye of the eider. We're actually going to have another shot from an earlier program we did. If you look carefully at the eye of the spectacled eider, they have blue eyes. Like all of our spectacled eiders have blue eyes, and it's just this stunning blue color. Really not like hidden or anything. You can see it pretty well if you look into the eye there. This was from an earlier program, our scale session program, where we were feeding these birds and taking their weights. And so that is the spectacled eider. Now we have one more duck that we're going to talk about today. We talked about the harlequin. We talked about the 2 eiders. And if we kick back into my handheld, I'm going to look around for our Smew, which I can see the female Smew. So let me move my camera. She's kind of tucked back. She's dabbling sort of right at the little water line here in the habitat. So she might be the flashiest of our female ducks, I would say. She's got kind of this rusty red head. She's got little white cheeks. She's got some striping on her wings. I do see the male, actually, so I'm going to see if I can get a good angle on him. He's kind of tucked back behind the rocks. But I want you to guess. If you've never seen the Smew before, and this is S-M-E-W, if you've never seen the Smew before, I want you to guess, how does the male look compared to the female? Is it kind of just a slight variation? Is it going to look the same? Here comes the male cruising around looking for the female. There he is. Those are the same bird, male and female. And the male actually has a little mohawk. He's got it down flat right now, but sometimes he pops that mohawk up a little bit. In fact, I have some pre-recorded footage. I think he pops that mohawk up a little bit in our pre-recorded footage, but we'll see. And so these birds, really, really cool. Their bills actually have some serration on them, and that follows for several of our ducks here, that they've got a little bit of grip. And of course, they do need to get food. This one, I believe, is hauling some fish out of the rocks there. Yeah, it looks like got a little fish. But here at the SeaLife Center, we have gone over food prep. We're going to talk about duck food prep just a little bit more in a moment, because it is a bit different from the food prep you might have seen if you checked out our aviary food prep video. I think that one was called Bird Breakfast, even though it was really preparing food for the entire day. There you go. That mohawk just popped up a little bit, but I mean, he can stand it all the way up. It'll come forward. There it is a bit more. Oh, and it went flat as he was checking out what's this murr doing here. Maybe thinking it's a little bit of a threat to his domain, his territory, as he's trying to show off for the female. And that's in part what that mohawk is. You can see he pops it up, and then he'll also pop that mohawk down flat. So a really fun duck to sort of follow around in the aviary, even though they like to go hide back behind the rocks. And when they tuck their bill back, that mohawk really pops up nice sometimes. This is how, by the way, people always ask, what are they doing when they turn their head about 180 degrees around and tuck it under their wing? That's sort of how they'll nap. That's a resting position, and even if their eyes are open, it's still a resting position, but it also keeps their bill warm, because they don't have those nice warm feathers on their bill, and so they'll tuck the bill up into their feathers, and that's also why sometimes people ask if our birds are missing a leg. They'll be like, oh, does that duck only have one leg? No, it's just tucked a leg up inside its feathers. And so that is what it's doing, trying to keep that leg warm, because the leg also doesn't have feathers. All right, so those are the 4 types of ducks that we have out here right now. Now, you might say, hey, wait a minute, I've seen earlier videos, you also have the long-tailed ducks. And it's true, we did have long-tailed ducks. Those are transferred from the SeaLife Center, being transferred from the SeaLife Center, down to another facility that has a much larger flock. We've decided they would like to go hang out with even more. A lot of these birds are pretty flocking birds. You know, they like these large groups. So we've decided that our long-tailed ducks are going to enjoy it down with a bigger flock at another facility. But you might notice I've got someone else out here. This is Laura, for anyone else who's tuned in for previous bird programs. Laura usually comes on out, takes some questions, and is just kind of an aviculturist that we can rely on for answering those questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them on in the chat there, or you can text us with that number we've got in the description, or that we show at the beginning. But how are things getting in the aviary? It seems like the ducks are pretty active right now.
Yeah, it's definitely ramping up a little bit. Everybody is making sure to show off for each other, and they're pairing off a lot more than they have over the winter. The ducks actually do start earlier because the season in Alaska is pretty short compared to down in the lower 48. So they really have to start thinking about breeding season even when it's still cold. So they really do start in the winter to show off for each other. But yeah, they have a shorter season, so you got to make the most of what you got.
Now, I mentioned before the ducks are going to kind of migrate through.
Yes.
Because they're going to go past us. They're going to actually, well,
a lot of them do.
Our eiders, for example, are going to go way up to the tundra marshes and hang out up there. The Smews actually don't really nest in Alaska for the most part. You might see them way out in the Aleutian Islands, but they're actually like migrating through, and they'll hang out over in Eurasia ways. But I know that for murres, for example, right? We've been out on boats before, and we've seen these murre colonies where they're up on the rocks. But before they move up onto the cliffs, they actually sort of all meet up in the water at the base of the cliffs, and that's where they pair off. Are the ducks going to pair off before the migration, or do they wait until they get all the way up into the tundra marshes?
So specifically for the eiders, they have a couple of areas they go first, where they're going to actually like molt and think about all that sort of stuff, and that's when they're doing a lot of that pairing activity. So they do pair for this season, and the male eiders actually stick around for a little bit, not the whole season, but they'll stay out there for like a little bit with the lady just to make sure she's fully settled.
Okay. He won't really take care of the nest, though.
Absolutely not. That's not his job.
No. And if we do end up doing some videos about our nesting here, which I'd love to do, it's fascinating. Some of our birds, like our puffins, our murres, the alcids, they both take care of the nest, male and female. Great. That's a wonderful split of duty there. But the ducks, the male, he's super, super flashy, he's super, super colorful. And remember, I said the females aren't really that colorful because they're trying to blend in with the grass. So if the male did help take care of the nest, if he sat on that nest of eggs, for any predators in the area, it's really obvious there's a duck right there.
Yeah, it's kind of like a giant flashing beacon. Hey, come over here, there's something interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's reasons for him not sticking around.
Nice.
But they also do like have like this little clutch that they're making sure is going to be nice and blended in. And actually, when you go out into the open tundra, those brown ducks you were mentioning, how they were like kind of drab, they're really, really camouflaged. You cannot see them at all. Even though there's no trees, nothing, they're just kind of like hunkering down on these little hills, but you can't see them at all.
It looks like maybe we got a question.
Do the male king-eiders have those pointed feathers sticking up on their backs all year long, or just during breeding season?
Oh, if you cut on over to the handy cam, I'll look there. The question was the male king-eiders. They've got these little shark fin feathers up. I'm going to try and find them. Oh, our Smews have not really moved much since I was looking at them. So the male king-eiders, they do have these cool shark fin feathers. Question was, are they up all year or just for breeding season? What about it, Laura?
Those are really there as ornamental sort of plumage, so those are really for the breeding season. When they molt, they actually get pretty darn brown, but they're only in that really brown, molty, off-season, non-breeding plumage for a pretty short window, actually. So most of the year they have them, but there is a short period, actually mid-summer, where they do not have them.
Yeah, and sometimes people think like, oh, their feathers messed up. They've got like crazy bed hair. But no, that's supposed to be there on the king-eiders. They have these really cool, it's like an old-timey car or
It looks like
something.
he might coo in just a second.
Oh, yeah? All right, we'll see if we get a coo out of them.
He was thinking about it.
Yeah, and speaking of the coo, we actually do have that pre-recorded, but right now is the breeding season, and they're trying to show off more than just visually. These birds have calls, and so I think we're going to mute our microphones and see if we can hear the call of a king-eider. They are trying to do it, but we don't have a mic on this camera right now. So we have a clip, a pre-recorded clip of king-eiders making their breeding calls. So you might have heard that there, that sound, that distinct sound, and we actually it's a behavior that they have to practice.
Yeah.
Because we've got a younger king-eider right now. We have Charles, who's our older male king-eider, and we have North, who's a much younger male king-eider. And his first year he didn't really care. His second year he started really trying to do some coos, but they weren't good coos. Mm-hmm. They were very raspy, very wheezy. He'd kind of come over to you and be like,
it was kind of creepy.
It was a strange sound. But I actually have another clip of sounds that these birds make, and this is from a different species. This is going to be our spectacled eider because they do make different noises. So let's hear what their call sounds like. All right, so as you can hear, and that one I actually even trimmed some of the audio out. Everything else kind of sounds muffled, but that trim doesn't affect the male's call for the spectacled eider. It's this deep thrum.
Yeah.
Kind of like if like a car is closed up, all the windows, doors closed on there, but they're really blasting their bass in there. It's kind of like that buzz that you can hear. And right now is when they're doing that.
Yeah, so they are making not only those visual displays like Alex was talking about, but they're making vocal displays. So a lot of these ducks have really elaborate dances, kind of, which is why I was kind of like, oh, he might coo, because you can kind of tell when they're ramping up to like do their full courtship. They have like specific moves.
Yeah, the way their head moves, they'll kind of like pump their chest up and it gets really pumped, and then they'll do this like rearing dance. Which Taylor, who's running the computer today, Taylor likes the punny names on videos. I will admit, the name on this virtual visit, it's not great, but it's very straightforward as to what it is. But Taylor was suggesting maybe dancing ducks or dashing ducks, as they are quite dashing in their plumages right now. So I'll admit those are better titles. Maybe we'll change those after the fact. And people that didn't watch live, you just won't know what it was. I mentioned earlier food, and Laura's out here, and Laura actually helped us prepare bird food earlier in the year. We did a virtual visit all about, like I said, bird breakfast, but really it was all day, and even like night bowls that are out here overnight.
Yeah.
But that was mostly looking at things like fish, squid, clam. I think there were some mussels in there. We didn't really look at anything specifically for the ducks. And as we saw in some of those clips, the ducks will eat the fish. That's A-okay, but they actually do get some other stuff as well. And I've got some little samples of it here. I've got 2 little dishes, and we've got some close-up shots of these that we'll fire on up. So these 2 dishes have like a kibble there on the left. Very much, it looks just like a cat kibble. You know, I've got cats at home, and so that's pretty much indistinguishable from it. But the other stuff looks weird. It looks like if we just kind of crushed up like chalk. So what are we looking at here, Laura?
So this is, you're going to have to excuse the kittiwakes. They're also in nesting season, if you guys can hear that. But this is actually Missouri brand duck food. There is specific kinds of kibble made for ducks. And this is actually diving duck. We've also used sea duck, but they have like slightly different protein contents, basically. And the white stuff that Alex was talking about, it basically is chalk. It's calcium carbonate.
Okay.
So it is crushed up, that is actually crushed up oyster shells. But we give that as a supplement to our birds during nesting season. So she is laying clutches of eggs. So it's not just the one that our alcids are usually going to be laying. They actually lay between 4 and 6 usually. We had one who went really crazy last year and had 20 plus, wild woman. But that's so that their egg shells come out nice and hard. Because they're putting so much energy and resources into that, we want them to have the extra supplement. It makes sure that those eggshells don't go soft on us because she's got like 0 resources left from laying the other ones.
Right, yeah. When they're laying these eggs, of course, they're using nutrients from their own diet, from their body to make these eggs. And so, like, each egg they make, it's pretty costly sometimes. Our alcids, for example, I mean, they make 1 egg. And if we here at the SeaLife Center decide, like, you know, there's something wrong with that egg, or maybe we can't hatch out as many alcids this year, they'll take that egg, but they'll swap in a dummy because we don't want the animal to think like, oh my gosh, I have to lay an egg, I don't have an egg. Because it is very costly for these animals to lay these eggs.
Yeah, the alcid eggshells are actually thicker too, so that's why, one of the reasons there's only 1. The duck shells are on the whole a little bit thinner, but they do make more of them. Yeah. So yeah, that's why we're just giving them that little extra calcium. The alcids usually get enough calcium from the bones of the fish, so they don't really need the extra, but the ducks need a little bit of help.
And it looks like, well, I'm actually gonna kick the handy cam over in a second here to show our kittiwakes that you might keep hearing. I'll zoom on over there. But while I'm doing that, it seemed like we had another question here.
Yes. So how many species of birds are in the aviary?
How many species of birds are in the aviary is the question, which is an awesome question. We have quite a few. There is 12 total. So we have 5 alcids, 4 ducks. I just kind of count them off in the morning and kind of forget the total numbers of species. But just make sure all the individuals are there. There's Mickey and Minnie making their way across the habitat. The harlequins are actually the most mobile on land of all of our ducks. So I like to call them adventure ducks. They like to surf the rapids. Yeah.
Does anyone understand exactly how they make their calls? I'm assuming the eiders. Is it the same way wind musical instruments make their sounds, or some other mechanism?
So the way I understand it, which is pretty basic, to be honest, is so the eiders, especially those kings, are inflating some of their air sacs. So that's why he kind of looks like he's pumping up his chest, kind of like he's a bodybuilder. He's inflating the top air sacs, and he's forcing the air through his, the equivalent of their vocal cords.
Yeah, because birds, they have very strange lungs.
They do. They actually don't inflate like ours.
No.
That's the air sacs job.
All right. Well, any other questions there?
What is your favorite bird in the aviary?
Ooh, my favorite bird in the aviary? All right, we're gonna do our split here. Yeah, I know. Laura, for Laura, this is difficult. These are like, right, like what's your favorite pet or your favorite child or whatever, right? Like you can't split love. But
it depends on the day and who's doing what.
I was looking to see if they're down. We have 2 black oyster catchers here. I don't see them. I'm going to move the camera. Maybe I'll go way over that way and see if I can get an angle on them. They are the ones that nest up all the way at the top of the cliffs. They have a little scrape there. But we have 2 black oyster catchers. So those are probably my favorite, like top bird here. But what's a good bird? What's a good bird here?
They're all good birds.
They're all good birds. I knew as soon as I said it, I was going to get like, oh, they're all good birds.
No, it really depends on the day and who's doing what. Honestly, there's always something that makes you smile with the birds. I have kiddos who typically stay in top tier, and those are usually the education birds for the most part because I have the strongest relationship with them. So my main man's right now is Mr. Klinger, our rhinoceros auklet. But it definitely just kind of depends on who's doing what. That's funny.
I guess that's true. It's like my favorite ones are based off of my observations of them. I think they're a cool-looking bird. I like their little call. But behaviorally, I can also see they're a bit quirky, which I love them. They're sassy birds.
They're good ladies.
But you actually get to, I mean, you interact with them.
Yeah.
So you can sort of recognize the animals on an individual basis. So Laura definitely could be like, oh, Klinger. Not even the species, not even rhinoceros auklet, but like, oh, Klinger's a good boy because he actually comes and hangs out during breeding season. All right, I'm going to move the handheld camera here real quick and see if I can find those oyster catchers.
They both went to the top of the cliffs this morning.
Yeah.
They were down this morning, though.
They do come down. I think they're probably right up there by the little tree and heat lamp system that we got. No. So there's the tree, there's the heat lamp. But unfortunately, I don't see their bills sticking up. Oh, Laura says they might be over this way.
That's where they went this morning when they flew up to the tops of the cliffs.
All right. So they're definitely our most rare to see. If you are visiting the SeaLife Center and you want to try and catch a rare bird, not that it's necessarily a rare bird in Alaska, but here in the aviary, they are a rare one to catch sight of just because they really like to sort of hide up on those cliffs. And they're a little feisty. They'll actually toss down pebbles from up on those cliffs and everything else. So what can you tell us? You know, we see, of course, the ducks are getting in their plumage. But at the very beginning, I mentioned that the alcids are starting to get in their plumage. What's that look like right now? What's kind of the breeding season wind up for the alcids versus the ducks?
Oh, so it's kind of different. We're not necessarily, we have to open all their burrows, really. And everybody right now is still definitely very grumpy because you can see they're going in those feathers. And the horned puffins specifically are all flightless right now, so they're extra grumpy.
So they actually, when they molt, I mean, they shed it all, right? Okay.
Their primary feathers specifically, and some of them just shed their tail feathers, so they look a little sad.
So when they shed, I mean, they're losing a bit of insulation, but they're not losing their down, that really warm stuff. But they don't look their best. And so sometimes people come in and they're like, why does that bird look that way? If you sort of catch us during the molting times, they don't necessarily look like they're the cleanest bird. They sort of get a little puffed.
And the ducks do this too. It's just a different time of year.
Yeah.
So they've already done that because they're trying to look super cute right now. So you don't want to be molty when you're trying to court.
Yeah. Any other questions over there? We got a question.
How long typically does it take for a king eider per se to switch its feathers?
Ooh, so that molting period, when like a king eider, for example, was the example in the question there, how long does it take for it to sort of drop its feathers and then grow in new feathers?
So our horned puffins are almost all done with their molt, so they're going to be pretty much next month. So about a month per bird to like fully switch all of their feathers. But it definitely goes based on the time of year. So sometimes they're going to keep them a little bit longer because you want to be blended in a little bit more. But they have multiple plumages too, you know. So there's the really bright summer plumage. You want to stay in that for the breeding season, really. And then there's the more off browns and sorts of colors, which is where you're going to be more camouflage. So when you don't need to be impressing anybody, you're going to stay in that. So it kind of transitions a little bit more gradually, just based on the time of year.
Okay. But about a month, it sounded like, from dropping them to sort of getting back to where they were.
Yeah, especially when they're going flightless, it can take like a couple of weeks definitely to grow back in those primaries fully.
And you said they get kind of grumpy at that point? Yeah. So.
That's how I characterize them anyways. So these birds are really good at swimming and diving, so that's why they can nap on the water. They feel really safe and comfortable on the water. And a lot of them are really, really awesome at doing that. So they don't necessarily need to fly all the time, but they definitely feel a little bit more safe and protected when they're able to fly as another avenue of escape.
Perfect. Well, I just really quickly want to say if there's any final questions, we're going to kind of wrap on down here. It looks like maybe we do have one. So.
Yeah,